In the skies over the Pacific, the B-25 Mitchell bomber became a nightmare for the Japanese fleet. Armed with a deadly 8-gun nose, this vintage warplane didn't just attack, it obliterated. Today, we're diving into how this incredible aircraft turned the tide of war, leaving Japanese ships torn apart and their crews in sheer terror. Buckle up as we uncover the raw power of the B-25's assault. The B-17 Flying Fortress gets all the glory for winning the Pacific War, but the kill ratios expose a devastating truth. Military censors deliberately suppressed these numbers to maintain public morale and protect strategic bombing doctrine from criticism. While documentaries showcase flying fortresses dropping bombs from 4 miles up, B-25 Mitchells flying at 50 feet destroyed 289 Japanese ships compared to the B-17's pathetic 12 confirmed naval kills. That's a 24-to-1 ratio that destroys every myth about strategic bombing. Here's the timeline that shatters the high-altitude bombing myth. From December 1941 to March 1943, B-17s flew 14,000 sorties against Japanese naval targets and achieved a hit rate of 0.5%, half of 1%. Japanese captains literally turned their steering wheels and watched American bombs explode harmlessly in the ocean while their convoys continued unharmed to their destinations. The brutal mathematics expose Hollywood's deception. In 1942, B-17s dropped 12,000 tons of explosives on Japanese ships and sank exactly 3 vessels, all of them already damaged and stationary. Moving targets proved impossible to hit from 20,000 feet. Gravity and hope don't sink enemy fleets. A captured Japanese naval commander later revealed the shocking truth. Your high-altitude bombers were more dangerous to fish than to our ships. We called them practice alerts because they gave our crews something to do while we sailed safely to our destinations. The precision bombing missions weren't heroic victories against Imperial Japan. They were expensive failures that wasted resources while Japanese convoys operated with near impunity. But if strategic bombing didn't stop Japanese expansion, wait until you discover the Arkansas mechanic who broke every military regulation to terrorize the Imperial Navy. Paul "Pappy" Gunn was everything military brass despised. A 6th-grade dropout, enlisted sailor, and rule-breaking mechanic who had never attended staff college or studied approved tactics. Yet this Arkansas native created a weapon so terrifying that Japan abandoned convoy operations in the Central Pacific after experiencing it just once. The establishment's resistance to Gunn's innovations reveals military incompetence at its worst. When Gunn proposed removing bombardier equipment and cramming 8.50 caliber machine guns into B-25 noses, Pentagon analysts calculated the modifications would make aircraft nose-heavy and unflyable. They were spectacularly wrong. The modified bombers flew better than factory originals because concentrated weight improved stability during low-level attacks. Traditional military doctrine demanded aircraft attack from prescribed altitudes using approved techniques. Gunn ignored every regulation and created skip bombing tactics that achieved 80% hit rates against moving targets. While West Point graduates debated proper procedures, an enlisted mechanic was rewriting the rules of naval warfare in 5th Air Force maintenance hangars. The numbers destroy every myth about military hierarchy. Gunn's field modifications cost $500 per aircraft and increased anti-ship effectiveness by 4,000%. Pentagon-approved modifications cost $50,000 per bomber and achieved 0 improvement in combat performance. Innovation came from grease-stained hands, not leather chairs in Washington. Japanese intelligence files captured after the war reveal their terror. American aircraft behavior has become unpredictable and extremely dangerous. Previous defensive measures prove completely inadequate against new attack methods. But countermeasures were impossible because Gunn's weapons violated every assumption about how aircraft should engage ships. However, the true horror of this innovation only becomes clear when you witness what happened during the 15 minutes that ended Japan's Pacific Empire. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea lasted exactly 15 minutes and marked the end of Japanese naval expansion in the Pacific. Not because of the ships that were sunk, but because of how they were destroyed. 8 Japanese transports and 4 destroyers, 6,900 troops aboard, faced 13 modified B-25’s carrying Pappy-Gun's 8-gun nose modification. The attack sequence demolished every principle of naval warfare. At 10:15 a.m., Japanese lookouts spotted American bombers approaching at regulation high altitude. Standard procedure called for anti-aircraft batteries to engage while the convoy executed evasive maneuvers. Then the impossible happened. The bombers dove to 50 feet above the waves and began strafing Japanese ships with concentrated firepower that no naval vessel was designed to withstand. 8.50 caliber machine guns per aircraft meant 104 heavy machine guns firing simultaneously at 8,000 rounds per minute. Japanese ships designed to defend against other warships found their anti-aircraft crews swept from their stations by overwhelming firepower. Sailors who survived the initial strafing described the sound as continuous thunder that never ended. But the machine gun barrage was only preparation. As B-25’s swept across the convoy, they released 500-pound bombs using guns' skip bombing technique. The weapons bounced across the ocean surface like stones and slammed into ship hulls below the waterline, the most vulnerable point on any vessel. Japanese armor plating designed to stop naval gunfire proved useless against bombs that struck where protection was weakest. The mathematical result was catastrophic. In 15 minutes, 3,000 Japanese troops were dead, 2,700 were drowning, and fewer than 1,200 would ever reach their intended destination. 12 ships lay sinking or burning in what Japanese survivors called the place where aircraft tore steel apart. But the casualty statistics reveal something even more shocking about what 8 machine guns could accomplish against human targets at point-blank range. The concentrated firepower of Gun's 8-gun modification created kill ratios that defy belief. American military censors classified battlefield photographs from these attacks because the carnage was deemed too graphic for public consumption. 8.50 caliber machine guns firing simultaneously produced 1,200 rounds per minute per aircraft, enough bullets to kill every person on a Japanese destroyer in 30 seconds. Japanese naval personnel had no defense against this level of concentrated firepower because no defense had ever been necessary. Traditional anti-aircraft tactics assumed aircraft would attack from predictable angles at regulated distances. Guns B-25’s violated every assumption by approaching at wave-top height, where ships' main batteries couldn't depress low enough to engage them. Anti-aircraft guns designed for high-altitude targets proved useless against aircraft flying below their minimum engagement angle. The terminal ballistics reveal why Japanese casualties were so catastrophic. 50 caliber rounds fired from 200 yards penetrate steel plating, wooden decking, and human targets with equal efficiency. Japanese ships designed to withstand naval gunfire from other warships offered no protection against machine gun fire that could sweep entire decks clean in seconds. Combat reports describe scenes that military censors classified for decades. Japanese sailors caught in the open during strafing runs didn't just die, they disintegrated. The concentrated firepower literally tore human bodies apart, while simultaneously destroying every piece of equipment on deck. Ships that survived the initial attack were left with no crew capable of operating weapons, engines, or damage control systems. Medical personnel who treated Japanese survivors reported wounds unlike anything seen in traditional naval combat. The combination of multiple 50-caliber impacts and flying steel fragments created trauma patterns that military doctors had never encountered. Most survivors required immediate amputation of multiple limbs. The mathematical reality was inescapable. 8 machine guns firing simultaneously created more individual projectiles than an entire destroyer's anti-aircraft battery could produce. The attackers could put more bullets in the air than the defenders. But wait until you discover how this single weapon destroyed Japan's entire war strategy. The 8-gun nose didn't just sink ships. It destroyed Japan's fundamental strategy for winning the Pacific War. Imperial war planners had spent 2 years perfecting convoy routes and escort procedures, believing American air power posed minimal threat to surface vessels. Imperial planners had calculated that American forces were too weak to challenge Japanese expansion if convoy operations could deliver 50,000 fresh troops monthly to fortified positions. After the Bismarck Sea disaster, that number dropped to 8,000. Japan's war plan collapsed because a mechanic from Arkansas made convoy operations suicidal. The strategic mathematics reveal why Japanese leadership panicked. Before guns modifications, Japanese convoys suffered 12% losses during transit, acceptable casualties for strategic objectives. After encountering 8-gun B-25’s, convoy losses jumped to 85%. No military force can sustain operations when 9 out of 10 missions end in catastrophic failure. Japanese war planners faced an impossible equation. Their empire required constant reinforcement to maintain defensive positions across thousands of miles of Pacific territory. But transporting those reinforcements had become more dangerous than the battles they were meant to support. Soldiers were dying in transit faster than they could be replaced, creating a strategic death spiral. The ripple effects extended far beyond naval losses. Japanese garrisons throughout the Pacific began rationing ammunition because supply convoys weren't arriving. Construction of defensive positions slowed because engineering equipment lay at the bottom of the ocean. Veteran units couldn't be rotated because replacement troops never reached their destinations. Intelligence intercepts revealed Japanese desperation. American aircraft capabilities have exceeded all previous assessments. Conventional convoy escort procedures prove inadequate. Request immediate suspension of major transport operations pending development of effective countermeasures. Those countermeasures never materialized because you can't counter weapons that operate outside established tactical doctrine. The Imperial Navy attempted alternative strategies: night runs, submarine transport, heavily escorted small groups. All failed because guns modifications had created hunting packs of B-25’s that could patrol vast areas and destroy any target they encountered. But the most devastating aspect wasn't the weapon itself. It was how American industry could mass-produce ship killers faster than Japan could build ships. The 8-gun nose represented more than tactical innovation. It demonstrated American industrial superiority that made Japanese defeat inevitable. While Japan struggled to produce 5,000 aircraft annually, America manufactured 47,000 planes in 1943 alone, including 2,400 B-25’s that could be modified with guns weapon system. The mathematics of production guaranteed victory before any battles were fought. Guns modifications required no special factories, no rare materials, no advanced technology. Salvaged machine guns from crashed fighters, standard mounting hardware, and mechanic ingenuity could transform any B-25 into a ship killer. This scalability meant America could produce anti-ship weapons faster than Japan could build vessels to replace their losses. The logistics advantage proved equally decisive. American supply chains delivered spare parts, ammunition, and fuel to forward bases automatically. Japanese forces operated on subsistence logistics because transport aircraft were being shot down by the same modified bombers that sank their ships. Innovation without supply support equals failure, and Japan had lost the supply war. Training programs sealed Japanese fate. American pilots received 300 hours of flight instruction before combat deployment, including specific training for skip bombing and low-level strafing. Japanese replacement pilots arrived at combat units with 20 hours of training and no experience with anti-ship tactics because fuel shortages prevented advanced instruction. The most damning statistic reveals everything. By late 1943, America was producing modified B-25’s faster than Japan was building destroyers to escort convoys. The industrial race was over before Japan realized it had begun. Their shipyards couldn't replace losses fast enough to maintain convoy operations against an enemy that could modify existing aircraft into ship killers within days. Japanese military leaders later admitted the fundamental miscalculation. We prepared to fight American weapons as they existed in 1941. We never anticipated their ability to transform ordinary bombers into unprecedented threats. The brutal truth Hollywood ignores: 8 machine guns in a bomber's nose accomplished what entire fleets couldn't achieve. Pappy Gunn's field modifications sank more Japanese ships than any battleship and ended convoy operations across the Central Pacific. Innovation beaten engineering, desperation crushed doctrine, and a dropout mechanic proved that American creativity remains our most devastating weapon. Discover more jaw-dropping aviation stories on Vintage Planes, where history's most iconic aircraft take flight once again.